Restorers. Welcome to season 2, episode 2 of Chasing the Vision in partnership with Violand Management Associates and Exit Strategies. I'm your host, Michelle Blevins with CNR. And of course, you know our two experts who are here, Tim Hull and JT Cry. I think this episode is going to resonate with a lot of restorers. 2024 was a really tough year. Claims volume was down. There were some restorers who kind of managed to make up for it with the hurricanes at the end of the year. Some restorers did do really well last year. I'm not saying that there aren't those contractors that didn't do really well, but a lot of contractors, I think, and vendors alike, that just felt like 2024 was a hard year. So we're using this episode to talk about how can 2025 be better? How can we turn things around, have this be a more positive year? I think that there are already some trends, maybe even with weather, that's making it look like maybe this is going to be a better year anyway, just talking in weather, but that's what we want to talk about, because you can hopefully have good years even when things look bleak from the outside looking in. So that's what we're going to talk about. So Tim, I'm going to toss it over to you first to talk a little bit about why 2024 was such a struggle and kind of what you saw from your clients throughout the year that kind of everybody was struggling with.
Yeah. So this is going to be hard for me, Michelle, because this is an admission of guilt, I guess. Because if you talk to any of our clients, and the message that I was trying to send to them was an optimistic one throughout 2024, and obviously the statistics tell us otherwise. But
Yeah, yeah.
was it a rough year? Yeah, I'll admit that it was a rough year. I think a lot of it is attributable to fatigue.
Hmm.
Um, a lot happened in 2024, especially when you compare it year over year to 23.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
23 was a good year for everyone. Claims were up, work was, abundant.
Yep.
Then we come into 2024 and you've got a mild winter to start the year off with. You've got an election year, and the turbulence that's associated with that, the economic uncertainty that comes with it, and how that has an impact on people's desire or willingness to submit claims. There was just a lot going on in 2024 that created a recipe that was, I don't want to say doom and gloom, because it wasn't. But the stats are what they are. Our analysis that we did of the revenue for 2024 was pretty clear. It showed almost a 7% decline from the first quarter to the second quarter in revenue, and that mirrored the claim side of things. Matter of fact, early reports, I think you and I may have actually been at the same conference when we heard them talking about a 20 to 22% reduction in claims in the first quarter of the year. So the numbers that we were seeing on the contractor side from a revenue standpoint seemed to be a little bit lower than that. But needless to say, 7% from first quarter to second quarter, that's a pretty big shift.
Yep.
Fortunately, we saw an uptick between the second quarter and the third quarter, so that was actually a positive side on the revenue side of almost 2%. But then we fell back into that slump from the third to the fourth quarter, which kind of, ended the year on a sour note, I guess. And then depending on how you look at the results of the election, you could say that was, just kind of double whammy. But either way, we are where we're at. I think there were a lot of things that contributed to the lackluster performance in 24. But I'm going to remain optimistic, and I'm sure JT will share some information and insights on what he was seeing on his side. But I've got a lot of optimism going into 25 here, and we're going to talk about some good things that we can change.
I like it. There is a lot of optimism in the industry right now. I will definitely say
Mhm.
that going to first few conferences of the year, I do think restorers feel better about this year. And I think people are talking about it. And I can tell even from the vendor side, I think the vendors are feeling better as well. The vendors were also feeling the big squeeze last year. So I think in general, everybody is feeling better and more optimistic. So that's good. JT, what about you? What's your insight from 2024?
Well, thank you, Michelle. First, I want to second everything Tim said. That's phenomenal. And I'm just going to put a big stamp of approval on all that. So I'm not going to add too much. I'll keep it at a pretty high level from where I sit. I think there was a lot of uncertainty last year for all the events that Tim just mentioned. And I want to also throw in sort of the squeeze that's happening. Michelle, you just threw out that term. It's a term I've used for a little while now, with insurance companies and these carriers, and we'll call it customer service or lack thereof in communication and trying to get his contractors paid. That is not getting any better, and I think that it would be a great place to start with some improvement. And then let's throw in the events in Florida and California, and everything that's happening, which is changing the industry for everybody. So I think there's just this, I won't call it a tsunami, but this wave of uncertainty that hit in 24. And now we're trying to figure out how to navigate that. And I think some of the lessons that were learned in COVID, for those couple of years, and I think we're going to relearn some lessons along some same veins, and we'll probably get into that here shortly. But I think the common theme from my seat is to watch your overhead. Where I saw companies get into trouble in 24 is they just kept growing and they set their overhead at certain levels. And then when there was a 10, 15, 20% decrease, it really got some of these contractors in trouble because they couldn't back up very quickly.
Mm-hmm. That's got to be a hard adjustment to make, especially when 2023 was such a good year. And so people kind of rode into 2024 expecting maybe something similar, and that was not the case. So adjusting can be difficult, especially in a cash tight business, which we've talked about
Correct.
multiple times. So, okay. So Tim, going back to you, looking into 2025, what are some of the things that restorers should be looking at now? We're recording this in February, so still beginning of the year, to make sure that they do bounce back and they do have a healthier 2025, maybe even regardless of what claims volume overall looks like.
Yeah, I mean, claims, when you talk about revenue and opportunity, Michelle, and even you discuss things like market share,
Mm-hmm.
it's all relative to what's available.
Yep.
So the size of the total pie that's available um, for work opportunities that are out there, it ebbs and flows throughout the course of the year. So that cyclical nature in which we deal with is actually pretty predictable, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But back to your point, when you look at 24 compared to 23, you've got a drastic contrast there. When you have a significant increase like that, JT, you mentioned, the cash flow issues. The timing of all that is pretty important too, because you have two hurricanes that hit, in the third and the fourth quarter of the end of the year, and then you couple that with the wildfires. Not that the same contractor's working each one, but when cash is scarce to begin with, and then you throw an event on top of that, then it becomes a bigger and even bigger issue because it minimizes the amount of operating capital that those companies have. So if all your money's sitting in AR, that doesn't give you a whole lot of ability to then buy new equipment, staff up, pay your vendors, and finance the projects that are now plentiful that are on your plate. So it does remedy itself over time, but that's neither here nor there. But back to your original question, Michelle's, what's the first piece of advice that I would give contractors coming into 2025? It's really take a close look at your business development activities and your sales and marketing. Okay, and primarily what I would advise contractors to do is double down on your key accounts. The natural tendency when work is scarce is to go out and I call it hunting with a shotgun. You go out and let's just start shooting and let's see what we can hit, right? And you end up with a very broad message at that point. Yeah, we'll be everything to everyone. We're a full service contractor, and if you want us to do contents and mold remediation and damage repair projects, we're a one-stop shop. But then you start talking to a bunch of folks that are maybe outside of your typical audience that you don't normally do business with. That puts a big strain on your sales and marketing team, for one, because they're not focused on what they're doing. And secondly, it's an operational strain because you're bouncing from one type of job to the next constantly and you're shifting gears and the inefficiency just kind of rises to the top. So my advice to contractors first and foremost is go back to your key accounts, understand what you're good at, where you get your work, and double down your efforts on solidifying those relationships. Now you don't want to push them over. We have a 20% kind of threshold. You don't want any one referral source to represent greater than 20% of your total revenue leads. But if you can get 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of those, and you can get the bulk of your work and get more work from the same accounts that you're already doing business with, you're going to be much further ahead than going out with the rest of the competition and hunting with a shotgun, just trying to see what you hit.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. So JT, you've also worked with a lot of companies who I'm sure even maybe when they're in the process of maybe trying to sell, we had a down here, now we need to do better this year if we really want to sell or we want to go to market or to keep our exit strategy in place. So talk about some of the things from your point of view that contractors need to be doing or could do to help rebound from what could be a difficult year.
Well, again, I think Tim hit the nail on the head here, but I want to amend one comment that Tim made just from my seat. And, Tim is correct. A lot of times, referral sources or clients, we don't want them over 20%. But if a project comes along and it pushes that company or individual or referral source to 25 or 30 or 40 because of a really nice project, that's fantastic. We won't ask you to turn away the money. That extra just doesn't necessarily help the bottom line when it comes to valuation. But if it's money, it's all going to spend the same. And if it helps dig you out of 24, that's terrific from my seat.
Mhm.
So when I think of Tim's comments, he is spot on. And I always think of the 80-20 rule. I think it's the Pareto rule. Um, and if you think of the people you're already working with, that's the low hanging fruit, right? And instead of going out trying to create a new wheel, let's try to throw in some services that already can be targeted towards those clients. And a couple examples, I've got one that's going after hospitals right now, and they're landing some pretty impressive TI work. They've got all the gear, they've got all the manpower, they've got the capacity. Why not? I've got another one going after TIs, some capital improvement projects, and they're getting them. And guess what? These are paid in 30 days. There's not insurance involved. And one of my clients grew really from about 4 million in sales up to 14 or 15 million in sales due to a lot of private work. And they never had any cash flow issues as they did it because it's a 30-day pay with some pretty healthy deposits down. And you just don't find that in the mitigation and restoration world. So I would say think outside the box a little bit. And if you can do that and using the team that you have, the tools that you have, the bandwidth and the expertise, I think sort of lifting your head out of a rut a little bit and expecting the phone to ring. So many, Tim, you might face this too. When I talk to clients about what is your marketing plan, what are you doing? And sometimes we get that deer in the headlight look, and essentially it's like, well, I sure hope the phone rings next week. And I think that feeling in that position is gone by the wayside. There's got to be a more proactive approach.
Okay.
JT, I just had a meeting with a client yesterday, and he used the term crack and boiling a frog in water all in the same sentence.
Okay.
And we can all guess what it comes back to. It's that he gets 85% of his revenue through third-party administrators, through program.
Yep.
Now you couple that with the fact that he's also a franchise. So he's committed in some regards to some of those obligations. But
Yeah.
if you look at the degradation of the gross profit that he's producing on these jobs over time, as they continue to kind of tighten the wrenches a little bit, well, we're not going to give overhead and profit on this now, or we're not going to, do whatever. Just fill in the blank with an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
It's all there, right? But those are all choices. At the end of the day, he admitted, look, I'm like an addict. They give you so much work and they keep giving you more work, and the more you're willing to take it, well, there's a reason that they're giving you more work. It's because you are willing to take it. And more work at smaller margins isn't good for business. So at some point,
I'm guessing, Tim, to your point, I'm guessing direct versus TPA is a whole episode in and of itself, probably,
it
multiple
really is.
sessions. And I know there's some people addressing that out in the industry right now, where the trends have been the last 15 years. So it'll be real interesting to see where it goes the next 2 or 3.
Okay, so all right. Well, JT, actually, I want to go on a little tangent really quick because I don't think we can have this conversation without also talking a little bit about what you think the industry will look like this year. After a difficult year, there wasn't a whole lot of M&A activity in
Yeah.
2025. I think PE and industry strategics were a little bit more silent last year. So how do you foresee that changing now that it does feel more optimistic? And I know that some people are hungry to start making acquisitions again. So just really
Yeah.
quick, what do you think is going to be happening this year? If you could give a few predictions, what do you think?
That's predictions. Ooh, I don't know. I haven't got my crystal
Well,
ball out for a
what's your
while, but
pulse on the
yeah,
industry, I
you're
suppose?
correct. The buyers are hungry right now. That's a very accurate comment. There was not much to look at in 24.
Yeah.
I valued 15, 18 different companies of size and pushed all but one off to this year or next. And they're planning, they're doing the right thing. I think they're listening to Chasing the Vision podcast. So they're restructuring their exit ramp accordingly. And I think Tim's working with a couple of them, and that's fantastic. But you don't ever want to sell on a down year. and you've heard me say this, we just literally hand the buyer a bat to club us over the head with, and it's not good for anybody. So if you've given yourself this runway, the future is a lot brighter if you can wait for an up year, no doubt. But I think this year and the next couple are going to be very interesting, because the first year, and I think we're going to see them this year, the real big money coming into the industry. I won't name names, but there's some industry strategics that are going to turn. There's going to be a couple of big PEs that are going to turn. And we're talking the hundreds of millions of dollar deals are going to happen at once. And it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the industry and all of the boutique firms trying to put their 8, 10, 12 companies together. And so now, if we get a little more granular, there is a hunger right there, because there isn't a lot to look at. And I'm getting approached every day now by firms and wealth offices and strategic funds and family offices, and you name it. They're reaching out saying, where are the sellers right now? I'm going to market with one right now. It's yesterday and today, and I've got 25 to 28 phone calls lined up for this company, because the buyers now, they have to report back to their investment boards and their committees, and they've got to start turning this money, and got to put it to work. Let's just call it that. And so I think now, if there's, and everyone knows me well enough, I don't have an agenda, right? I don't push anyone to sell. I'm not on that committee. But right now there is a hunger out there, and if you're on the fence and wanted to explore, it's not a bad time to explore. And it may continue to get better this year. I'm not saying there's a window, because this consolidation of the industry is going to be another 4, 5, 6 year play, I'm pretty sure.
Tim, anything you want to add into that before we move on?
I would second what JT's saying. We're seeing more and more interest. We see it on the client side, where clients are coming to us saying, "Hey, I got a call from this so and so last week. And
Yep.
do you know anything about them?" And us too, JT. I mean, we've got buyers that are calling us and saying, "Hey, do you have any clients that are thinking about selling?"
Yeah.
It's an interesting proposition, because you're right. Nobody wants to sell on a down year. But what happens whenever inventory is low in the real estate market too? It commands a higher price. So I think you're right. I think the next year, probably year and a half, I'd say, are going to be a flurry of at least offers. How many deals actually go through,
Yeah.
to be seen. But
Well said.
I think the activity is going to increase.
Yeah, and if we can get a decent winter to hit, I think it started about 3 weeks ago, in many parts of the country. If we can keep this little trend going for a few more months, that'll certainly help the year.
Yeah.
You guys seen the part of downtown Detroit that's like underwater because a water main broke and it's all frozen?
No.
That's wild.
Oh.
It's like many feet of water and cars completely just frozen down multiple blocks in
Oh,
Detroit.
wow.
Yes, it's cold. So hopefully more claims are coming. Hopefully not. I don't know. Okay, so going back to how to improve and turn things around this year, I think stories probably resonate best with the audience. And you two were kind of sharing some a little bit ago about, not throwing all your eggs in one basket, the Pareto rule, not relying too much on TPAs maybe for your workflow, expanding your service lines. Do either of you have any specific stories of, like, I had a client who added, JT, you mentioned like hospitals and things like that. Specific examples of a company that maybe was struggling and they got really creative and were able to really turn things around, even when maybe like normal MIT recon claims were down still. Big question. I know it's hard to pull stories out of
Tim, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a great example, and this is why I was so optimistic in 24, because I had a lot of clients. We had a lot of clients at Viola Management that were very intentional with their efforts. They put a good game plan together last year, and they turned results. One specifically was a contractor that wasn't necessarily in an area of the country where you had big seasonal fluctuation, but it was there. But they had a very specific plan. Hey, we're going to go after trade contractor partners for referrals, and they doubled down their efforts on it. They put a great sales and marketing plan together, and they saw it through. Even in some very lean months, I would say in the spring, that second quarter just seemed to be really rough for everybody. But even through the second quarter, they remained committed to that plan that they put together. and they ended up a positive. I think they grew in the double digits growth this year. Not high, 11, 12%, but still, that was pretty significant when we're talking about these numbers on a decline, right?
Yep.
And we had other examples where clients did that, where they picked a specific market that they wanted to go after or a service line that they wanted to promote, and they went out and they got it. Regardless of what the available pool of losses is out there, if you're committed to going and get it and you do it and you see it through, it's the uncertainty that really kind of hampers everybody. It makes you, dip one foot in the pool. No. If you're going to go, jump. And you're either going to sink or you're going to swim. And in this guy's case, he swam. So sometimes you got to take those risks in business.
Jump. I like it. JC, anything you want to add?
I'll just add, I'm going to take a different twist on it. I have seen more and more owners over the years. I think it started with COVID. And honestly, it probably started well before that. The hardest thing to get in the field is to help grow and manage is an owner's mindset. And many of you have heard me say that before, that, during COVID, especially, Tim, I know you heard it. We can't find good help. Nobody wants to work anymore. They don't want to do what I'm telling them. Well, and there might be a shred of truth to that, right? There's still a lot of great employees out there. And I have looked more in particular at what is the owner doing? What are they doing as a team or a leadership team or management team to get the most out of their employees? And there's a quick scenario right now that's happened. I'm working with a pretty sizable company in Southern California, and the sales manager, we have an accepted offer on it. The sales manager is very, very concerned about the growth and how things might change. And we're literally yesterday and today putting a incentive package together for him with some stock appreciation rights, and he's going to be key to driving this growth. And what we've done is made him now feel like an owner. He gets a percentage of this growth moving forward. Years ago, those conversations would have never happened. They just wouldn't have. And now owners and buyers as well are very keen on incentivizing their team. So I think if we can think outside the box, get some owners' mindsets out there with some stock appreciation rights and a little bit of a sliver of ownership, I'll tell you, the creativity and the accountability are going to go a long way. And I think people will be looking for opportunities in their downtime and where they can go find some more money, because now their pocketbook is affected. So that's what I would recommend, is start local and see what we can create organically.
I like it. Okay. All right, Tim, tossing it back to you. So business development was a big thing. That was something that you said people need to work on this year. What's something else, if you were to offer more advice, what's something else that companies should be doing this year to help rebound from 2024?
Probably the same thing I've been telling everybody for the last 15 years. Look, I'm an operations guy, right? And I think that contractors really need to take a long, hard look at how they do business.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about, your ethical business practices, but how's your business structured and set up? This has historically been a very lucrative business to be in from the gross profit level, right? Gross profit margins are generally pretty deep, especially if you're doing any type of emergency mitigation, drying type work. That affords a lot of cushion to the bottom line. And I think what you would find if we went through and we re-engineered the processes in a restoration operation, you'll find a lot of waste, a lot of redundant activity, a lot of things that are probably built in as a matter of convenience rather than a matter of need and necessity. So I think if we can take a more minimalist approach to operations of our business, you'll see that you can shave 4, 5, 6, 7% sometimes out of your operating lines. And that's where the margin's coming from to make up for the tightening of the screws, so to speak, with the claim side. Okay. There's a lot of cushion in there. And I think if we can revisit those through automation, there's a lot of technology out there today that didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago that we can capitalize on. I'm not talking about displacing people's jobs, but I'm saying allowing us to increase the capacity of those that we have, right? So if we grow the business by 20% in the next 5 years, do we need to grow our staff by 20%? I'm not talking about cutting jobs, but growing incrementally, so that you can maximize that revenue per employee. That measurement to me is very critical in a business, and I think we're probably at one of the lower sides in history right now, where the revenue per employee is very low. But to me, that's one of the biggest indicators that you can focus on. So automation, invest in technology, focus on efficiencies, tighten up the purse strings. Take maybe like you mentioned, JT, an owner's mindset. Look at it at the job level the same way as the owner would look at the P&L from the company level, and you'd be surprised what you can find.
JT, anything you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I'll just add a little math to it. Tim is spot on. He has been all morning. Tim, you're crushing it this morning. I like this.
I'm on the top of my game. It's cold here.
I like it. I like
like a
it.
blizzard in my window. I didn't notice that till I looked outside.
I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can barely see across the street. It's like, okay, continue.
So, from my seat, it is just watching the pennies. And when I look at companies and I see the margins get a little sloppy or a little bit too flexible, we'll say, so we've got some peaks and valleys in those margins. We try to even those out to something that's predictable. And many of you have heard my 3% story. I won't go into that again. But when you're doing, 20 million in sales, Tim, you mentioned 4, 5, 6, 7, 8%. That can be $6, 7, 8, $900,000 on the bottom line. That's material. Maybe you're doing 3 million a year, and that that 4 or 5% is 100,000. 150,000. Whatever your incremental margins are, watching your pennies will bring a material amount to the bottom line. And I don't want to step on Tim's toes, but when I'm going through P&Ls and I'll say, well, your insurance seems really high. Or why is estimating so much higher than other companies? And I can get owners to just look at and reevaluate what they're looking at, what they're doing. And sometimes that low-hanging fruit of 2, 3, 4% is without any effort at all can come right off the bottom. And so it's not hard to recover, 2, 3, 4, 5%. It just seemingly is there if you've got the time and the bandwidth to focus on it. And if you can, some pretty good things happen.
I think that's an interesting point. I bet that there are a lot of restorers that don't know maybe what the benchmarks are for like how much is normal for insurance for a $5 million company, for example. So that's a good reason to little plug for both of you to have a consultant on either side, somebody that's going to be able to look at your business and point out areas where maybe things are higher than they should be, or maybe you can make some wiggle room here. Like, don't always maybe try to do it internally. Like, don't be afraid to go to industry peers or find a consultant or find somebody else to help you through this that can give a different perspective that you might not have yourself. So that's my little addition there.
Yeah.
Michelle, it's interesting. You talk about the benchmarks, and it's really easy to talk about percentages of the gross profit line because it's all relative to the price you're charging, right? And that'll fluctuate up and down depending on the service line. But on the overhead side, of what's really interesting is to see how that has changed over the years, and especially since the COVID, and I don't want to use that as an excuse, but a lot of things have really kind of shifted. And so the insurance one, okay, that one caught my attention because you mentioned it. Well, your auto and your general liability should be around 1.5% of your revenue. It's like religion. If you're paying more than that, then you're either paying too much, you're overinsured, okay, or something's out of whack. There are states, out there like Florida, California, auto insurance is crazy expensive. But again, all that should be relative to the price that you're charging. Okay, there's a reason why gas is more expensive in Pennsylvania than New York or Ohio or whatever. It's all relative to the price. Crude oil is the same cost all across the country. It's all the taxes and things, the markups that go along with it, right? But one of the things that is not relative to your local economy that has changed just in the last 5 years, and I've been watching this, is the IT expense for companies, restorers. Where this used to be hovering between 0.5% and 1% of revenue. This is all your software subscriptions, your computers, all of your licenses that you buy for different estimating packages, your ERP systems, all that other stuff, right? It is eclipsed 2.5% across our client base just in the last couple years. That is worthy of paying attention to. And the reason I say that is because that one shouldn't change. That one should be like insurance. Okay. it should be relative to your growth. So if you're going to spend more money to have systems, you need to have a return on that system. It should be have a corresponding dividend that it's paying you in efficiency, right? So if you're going to spend $5,000 a year in software subscriptions or a licensing fee to something, that $5,000 better come out of somebody's salary that can now produce you $10,000 or $15,000 in a return. Not that you have to get rid of that person, but they should be able to now be free to do something more productive that contributes to the bottom line. So that percentage should not be changing. And the software guys that are out there are probably screaming at me right now, Tim, what are you saying? I'm not saying don't buy less software. What I'm saying is you have to use it more efficiently.
Yes.
Everybody wants to spend $1,000 on an iPhone. Okay. But we all use less than 10% of the functionality of this thing.
Oh,
So I'm not saying don't buy the phone. I'm saying figure out how to use the technology that you're buying because it'll produce that return at the bottom line.
seems like a good article topic. I'm just going to throw that out there while we're here.
I'll put it on the list,
You
Michelle.
should. That's a great article topic and some good data. So, okay, so we've talked about needing to grow your business development, work on that, and then operations, looking at different margins, those kind of things. So, JT, I'm going to toss it to you. Let's give like one more home run point from both of you of something to work on in 2025 that's going to help make sure you have a great year.
Oh, one more big point. Boy, that's a loaded question, Michelle. I'm going to say, if I had to narrow it down, I'd say lean on your team. There's a lot of talent out there. And I think a lot of times, and Tim can add what he wants to this, I think the team oftentimes is underutilized. They're not, speaking of technology and using it, I think teams out there, a lot of times, at least in my experience, these guys are like horses in the gate ready to go, right? They're just not being utilized to what they could be doing. And when it comes down to accountability and trusting them and treating them like owners and having them change the culture of what's happening, not just a place to work and go get a paycheck, but a place to make a career and really add value, that goes a long way. And I'm coming across more and more key employees who they're comfortable. They make their 100 a quarter, 150, 175. Many are over 200 with incentive packages, etc. They're comfortable, but they really want to change the workplace. And if they can do that by way of culture and being treated a little differently and being held to a different standard, even if it's holding themselves to a different standard, I think those dividends come back time and time again. So I'm going to say this culture coaching is, to me, it's kind of a wave of the future. And I don't know how to pin that down right now in this conversation. Culture is probably another own episode for sure. There's a lot of people focusing on that right now. And I think it has yet to filter down to where it needs to. And I think when it does, we're going to see some pretty motivated workforces.
Yeah, so true. Okay, Tim, what's your take? One more.
Well, I've got to second that one, JT, because 2/3 of our consulting model is people driven. So we're in the people business. And I would agree with you. I think that if you looked at utilization rates across the industry, again, back to my point, we're probably a little fatter than we should be. There's a lot of growth potential there to really maximize that revenue per employee, and the employees want it too. Look, they want the opportunity to grow. They want the opportunity to be productive. I don't believe for a second that people just go to work every day to clock in and just sit around and go, God, I wish I didn't have to work so hard. It's just not the society that we are. But come back to your question, Michelle, if I had to leave everybody, kind of with one more point, it would be, I think I'll come back to cash. I think we need to really take a closer look at cash reserves. And if I had some advice for 2025, I am optimistic this year. It's going to be a good year. Take some of that money that you would normally put in your pocket. I'm talking to owners now. Take a little bit of that money that you would normally put in your pocket and put it in savings. Build a strategic reserve, a war chest for your company so that you can capitalize on the event-driven activities that occur very predictably year over year. They happen, right? It may be off by a month or two. It may even skip a season. But this is a feast or famine business. I've been in it a long time, and the companies that really grow in the long run, they sustain that profitable growth, capitalize on the opportunistic nature of events. If you don't have money cash in the bank to capitalize on those events, you're going to walk away from that party feeling very disillusioned. And the valleys, when you go into the ruts, are going to feel that much worse.
Yep.
So go to the party, survive the hangover, and get ready to party again. But don't try to take a moderate approach to it, where I'm only going to drink a couple here. Go all in, man. You'd be surprised. Build that war chest, and then get ready for the next one because it's coming.
So I have a question. Michelle, you've heard Tim and I talk about now culture, watching your pennies, building cash, accountability, the war chest, thinking outside the box, all these things. You have a very unique position in the industry. If you were to leave somebody with a final nugget of wisdom, I mean, most of the players, what people are doing, the struggle out there. How would you leave listeners with some thoughts?
That is a great question.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
I think that a lot of what both of you have said in all of these points goes back to having good systems and processes in place in your business. That's going to help you get paid and make sure you have cash in the bank. That's going to help you hire the right people. It's going to help your business development processes. It's going to help your operations run smoothly. All of these things that we've talked about. So I think, if you can dial in on your systems and processes, I know that there were some owners last year when it was a tough year, they used the year like, things are feeling slow. We're really going to dial in, really figure out how to be lean. What do our systems and processes look like? How can we operate better as a company as a whole? And then that puts you in such a stronger position when there is a good year, when there is a feast over a famine. So again, like you both have talked about, use the famine to strengthen areas that you can overall. So that would be my.
No, I love it. Thank you. And I want to just add one more thought, Tim, and I bet you can add on to this. These changes that we're talking about, these are not monumental things sometimes. These are little changes.
Yeah.
The 3% here, the 2%, this little change. When you were talking, Michelle, conversion rates popped into my head. I sold a company a year and a half ago, and their conversion rates, while we were on the market, their conversion rates went from 51% to just over 70%, not quite 71. Imagine that both their PMs turned over. Imagine what that does to your bottom line. And so it's you just have to think I think every opportunity right now, people can be scared of what's coming down the pike and the squeeze and everything. I think so many of these decisions are also opportunities. So if we can wrap our head around how do we make the most of this, I think there's solutions there.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And I love to have the conversations with the folks that come and say, "Hey, can you give me a silver bullet or a magic pill? Like what is the secret sauce that
you have those, right, Tim?" Yeah.
I wish. Yeah. They don't exist.
Yeah.
They don't exist. When you hear stories about restorers that say, "Well, I quadrupled my growth in the last, 12 to 18 to 24 months," you have to ask them where did you come from?
Mm-hmm.
Or what happened during that period of time that led to that growth. You got to play the long game. If you're in it for the short game, great. Okay, I'm probably not the guy you want to talk to, and I'll admit that. But if you want to be in it for the long haul and build something that's sustainable, now let's have a conversation, Michelle, about what you're talking about, sharpening the saw.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, take that time to take a breather, and you boil that down to the employee level, like you were talking about, JT. When you hire people for the very first time, you have to be very transparent with them. You're going to work a 20-hour day, this week, and next week you might work a 6-hour day. Take the 6-hour day and go spend some time with your family, or knock off early, or whatever. Because the longer days are probably going to be more prevalent than the shorter ones. It's the same thing. You can extrapolate that over by a week, a month, a quarter, a year. It's going to happen.
Yep.
But it's a long game. You got to play it, and you got to have, like you said, systems and procedures,
Yep.
discipline on the cash management side, the operational efficiency, the good people. It all adds up. It's one big recipe, but it's not a magic pill.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Well
not.
said.
We'd all make a lot of money if there was a magic pill.
Right.
So All right, gentlemen. Well, thank you so much. This was a great episode. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. For anybody who's listening, you can find all these episodes on your favorite podcast platform. And you can find them on the CNR website. And I know that Violan shares them and Exit Strategy shares them, so you can find them everywhere. Thank you so much again, gentlemen. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Michelle.
Tim.